Chris?
Doing great, John. Thanks for talking to me.
Oh, welcome to Reel in Films. I'm not going to lie. Right now, I'm a huge fan of
Ah, thanks.
Attack of the Show, G4. I was there in the start and until the end. So, when I got the opportunity to see Attack of the Ducks, I was like, just shocked. I was shocked because I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna interview Chris Gore. Oh God, what am I gonna do?"
Well, I'll make it easy for you because we are nerds of a feather. And I think that like people that are super nerdy and geeky about movies or pop culture, they're just innately attracted to each other in terms of just like discussing, well, there's this movie and this, and not everybody can know everything. I mean, I know a lot about movies, but what I love is just meeting someone like that has like a deep knowledge of something I've never heard of that. Wait, what? And so it's just a conversation we all participate in.
Yes, I completely agree. It's like when you sit down with a group of people that just love the geek culture and everything. It's just a great conversation because probably who's next to you knows something that you didn't know, and then you keep learning and
Exactly.
learning. So that's a great of it. So Chris, I wanted to start off like, what inspired you to start this project of this amazing channel, and as well the show that made a big impact to the geek community?
Wow. Well, that's a good question. Well, one, I was a fan of the screensavers. I was a fan of the G4 TV network before I was even on the show. And a guy named Gavin Purcell brought me in for an interview because I had done a TV segment for him earlier. And he said, look, I'm just offering you the job. We have this segment called DVD Tuesday. We need you to come in on every Tuesday, just talk about movies on DVD. And I thought, this is like the perfect job for me. I love it. I will do that job. And I told him, I said, look, I have three stipulations. One, I want to be able to say whatever I want within reason. My opinion is my opinion. You know, you're not going to produce me or tell me to think a certain way. I'll tell you what my real authentic thoughts are. Secondly, I want to be able to wear whatever I want, like maybe a film threat t-shirt. And the third thing is I want to be able to keep all the DVDs I review. And he said, well, I can agree to the first two. But the third one, we need to keep the DVDs in our producer's library, which I then later discovered was where the producers would just steal DVDs and take them home. But they let me, it was the most fun I ever had on TV because I got to be myself. So I was on 3 episodes of the Screensavers and I was sworn to secrecy that I would not like reveal that the name of Screensavers would change to Attack of the Show. And originally, like, it's in the documentary, but we talk about what some of the other names of the show were. It was going to be called Game Time, which sounds awful. It sounds like a sports show. But it was, the best experience I ever had in TV. I got to be myself on camera, which I can tell you from my previous television experience, I wasn't really able to. You're kind of heavily produced to be a hip, cool person. And I don't know that I'm super hip and cool. I know I've got 6 long boxes of comics sitting in the corner. I feel like I've got the nerd cred because I've been collecting comics, God, since I was 5. But it was 2017. I was at South by Southwest Film Festival. And, I'd done a lot of TV before Attack of the Show, but every time I went to either a film festival or a Comic Con, someone would say, hey, Attack of the Show, G4 TV, whatever happened? And I thought, I was so actually kind of tired of being asked that question because I really didn't have an answer. I thought someone should make a documentary about Attack of the Show. Then I thought to myself, I think I'll make the documentary. So I was literally at South by Southwest. I registered Attack of the Show, no, excuse me, attackofthedoc.com. I thought up the name, popped into my head. And then I grabbed the social handles, and then I did a successful Kickstarter, and then we started shooting in March of 2020. And just as we had built out a studio, we brought in like our first interview subject, we did our in-person interview. The pandemic happened. We had to kind of pivot and make the documentary just differently than we originally envisioned. So It's an archival doc that is partially like an era. It kind of covers 2002 up to the present, so like 20 years of pop culture history, but through the lens of this show that I would argue was a huge milestone in pop culture history. That was, made at a time that, you know, comedy could be more dangerous then. People weren't worried
Yeah,
about
that's true.
people weren't worried about Twitter being or social media people being upset about something because you made a joke on a TV show. And now the internet, unfortunately, social media kind of polices content, and I don't know that that's a good thing. But it isn't. And I mean, it's a good thing that certain things have changed. But I also believe that you should be able to take risks in comedy. It should be dangerous, and you should be able to make mistakes. And whether the script was followed on Attack of the Show or mistakes were made, it was always entertaining.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there's there was like a very I would say natural feeling when you would sit down and watch Attack of the Show, even if it was on a live event in E3 or or Comic Con. You know, you felt that it was just natural. You know, even though they had their cards and everything, you felt that the show was moving forward without just like, hey, if this happens, then we'll just pivot on what's gonna happen next, right? So
Yeah.
going to that, you did mention two things that I'm just gonna pull them in one question to see if we can dive in a little bit much more in there. So I do remember your Kickstarter on 2019 for the documentary. Um, how did you feel when you completed the goal? And as well, what happened with those obstacles when the pandemic hit? Because I went back to that Kickstarter, I saw the timeline, and it there was that famous 2020 date. So can you tell us a little bit much more on how you felt when the Kickstarter was a full success and how you had to pivot from doing one-on-one interviews to what we see here in Attack of the Doc?
Well, I'll say this: doing a Kickstarter is or a crowdfund of any sort is a full time 24/7 job. It's like, and the way that you get people to donate to your campaign is by directly asking them. And it's I don't know, I think it's strange, and I felt almost guilty asking people for money because it's like saying, how much money do you like me? And then people give, $40 or $100, or some people gave $1,000 so they would get a producer credit. But I feel an immense um gratitude and also obligation to fulfill and make the best movie possible, that not only could I get to the Kickstarter backers, but also released to the world so that other people can see it on whatever video on demand platform, or eventually Blu-rays, which will be out in July during San Diego Comic-Con. So I felt this like, I mean, it was so like, it's just, you're just 24/7. So I felt kind of emotionally exhausted asking people to, for money to be able to do this. But then like when it was over, it's like, oh my God, now I have to actually do all this. I have to actually now make the movie. And then, we kind of like, we laid out a plan. I had a scriptment for the doc. We bought equipment. We built out a studio. We did our first interview in early March with a guy named Frank Myers, who was a producer on the show. And I'm like, okay, we're going to work our way up from producers, some other people, and we'll work our way up to the talent. And March 2020 happened, the pandemic happened, and everything was on hold. One of the key producers on the project, Bobby Schwartz, actually got COVID, and he did not get a mild form of it. He was sick for months after. He got the first wave. Some way, for some way reason, I avoided it. I was able to avoid it, and he really got sick. We didn't know what we were going to do. Our film productions, are we even allowed to continue making the movie? Then film productions were like, well, you have to have COVID compliance. This is 6 months later. How are we going to make this doc? And I was inspired by some other documentaries that were archival in nature that I think really inspired me, like, oh, I could make this doc, but I don't have to be in person with anybody. So there was a documentary made about John Belushi called Belushi, and the style was all made with cassette tape interviews with John Belushi's widow. She interviewed people like Lorne Michaels and Dan Aykroyd and Carrie Fisher about John. And then, those audio interviews were married to archival footage, and that's how the movie was made. There's another movie where no footage was shot called You Don't Know Me, NOMI. It's about Showgirls, the movie Showgirls, and all the
Okay.
fandom. No footage was shot for that movie, and all the interviews were done over the internet. And I thought, well, I can do that. So I interviewed like more than 20 people from the old Attack of the Show days and the G4 days, including the two directors who directed combined. Genji Keen and Alan Wu did over 1,000 episodes of Attack of the Show. John Ryber, who was the key executive there and big champion of everything that made the network cool, he was behind it. I interviewed them for the documentary. I wanted the untold stories of the people who worked on the crew. Even like, cameramen and sound guys are in the doc. It's like you're getting these untold stories from people who work behind the scenes, which is a lot of fun. And I thought, well, I can tell this story and I can make this movie. It's just going to be an archival documentary. No interviews are necessarily done on camera. And that was the format that I chose to be able to tell the story. And ultimately, I think it gave it more of a benefit because it brings you into the era, like it going way back to like the early 2000s, which it's so funny to say the early 2000s is an era. It was a very, very different time. And it was a very different time when you look at technology. I mean, God, I remember I had a Razor. Do you remember the Razor phone,
Oh
which was
yeah.
the thinnest phone? Then I had like a Moto Q. I had like various versions of the Palm Trio, which had the little stylus in the device and then the full thing. This is before the BlackBerry. Okay. So it was just fun to see like tech, like it's like, and the way it developed, it's like, oh my God, I'm Captain Kirk. We literally have invented communicators, and they're even better. They do things, communicators don't necessarily do. So I don't know. It was like an exciting time, the early 2000s, of not just innovation in tech, but movies. God, I remember when Batman Begins came out in 2005, because I was not a super fan of the 1989 Batman. I thought the Joker was perfect. I thought Batman was really well done. I wasn't quite that movie. Like I would mixed feelings about the original Batman. The 2005 Batman Begins with Christian Bale blew my mind. That's when Attack of the Show started. There was like, I feel like people were getting in positions of power in Hollywood who understood nerd culture.
Yeah.
So, and like being a nerd, growing up a nerd. I mean, I was legit bullied for being a nerd, for being I was an indoor kid. You know, I took money I saved from my paper route and I went and I bought comic books and model kits. And I would watch all the monster movies and science fiction movies on TV that week. And any science fiction movie that opened in theaters, I was there day one for Tron, The Black Hole, Blade Runner, name the movie back in the 80s and 90s. Dude, I was there. So being a lifelong nerd, it was weird. We lived at a time, I grew up in a time where there'd be like, you would hope to get like 3 or 4 science fiction movies in a year. Now it's every week. I think that we are a
Exactly.
little, it's an embarrassment of riches of there's a Hawkeye TV show on Disney. I think we're a little spoiled where we've got like, all these different, and never in my wildest dreams did I think as a kid that there would be an Ant-Man movie, much less 3 Ant-Man movies. Okay. So it's like, maybe the first Ant-Man movie is my favorite. I think it's a very personal. It's a small story, pun intended. The third one maybe is not as great, but there's a third Ant-Man movie. I mean, we're just living in a time where maybe we should take a bit of a step back and appreciate that nerd culture is so rich. It's so like we have so much. It's like week to week. It's like, well, what's the next thing? Well, it's Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I never thought they would even, I remember the Guardians of the Galaxy comic book when it first came out. It was weird, man. It was a weird comic. And that was sort of the first team they focus on like a later team. So I didn't even know who Star-Lord was. He's a later character, but God, man, I really think we're living in a great time for nerd culture. I just wish that we could have the conversations and respect each other's opinions, even when they differ. It's like, you like this Star Trek, I don't, but I'm not an evil person for not liking the Star Trek that you like. Uh, my opinion doesn't invalidate your opinion. And I think somehow we forgot that. I mean, I expect politics to be divided, but geek culture, no, we're all on the same team. We love the stuff we
Exactly.
love. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I completely agree. Me being a 90s baby, I still remember my times being a full-fledged geek, just talking to some of my friends about the cartoons that were coming out, and then my mother being from the times of the 80s, she would only show me like 80s cartoons. So I would be like talking to my friends like, "Hey, how about Voltron or Thundercats or Messenger?" And they would be like, "Yeah, but that's not in Cartoon Network." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but it's a good show, you know." Um, and it's really interesting when I have conversations with people that are younger than me, and they're like, "You used to watch that?" I'm like, "Yes, it's something that existed." And um, even today, I one of my close friends, I told them like, "Hey, do you remember Attack of the Show?" And he was like, I never got to see it." I'm like, But you're a full fledged geek. How did not you not know what Attack of the Show was?" So, for me, Attack of the Show was a very big, impactful show. Not only that one, they had X Play, they had many other countless of shows in G4, but Attack of the Show was like the show that had a little bit of everything for everybody, and that's what made it like great for the community. So, Chris, how was it working with Kevin and Olivia when the show was still airing?
It was my best experience in television because both of them were incredibly authentic when they were on the set. They would always they always made it difficult for me, and I mean in a good way, meaning they would be challenging, or Kevin in particular would make like a joke that I'd be like, Wait, what?" Like I could, I mean, they were both master improvisers and I could hardly keep up, you know. I'm a guy that just loves movies. I didn't plan ever on being on television, but working with Kevin and Olivia was amazing. And the other thing is like, which I'll say is that their off-camera demeanor, and I can't even say this for myself, they knew everyone on the set. They knew their names. I didn't know that. Now I was in once or twice a week, so I didn't, and I would come in for my 5 minute segment and then I would be off. But they, their off-camera demeanor was amazing. And Kevin was like, I always considered Kevin sort of the Bugs Bunny of the show. He was there to be purposely be an irritant and to, be an instigator of crazy stuff that happens. And just Olivia was game for anything. I think the doc shows that. You see like a greatest hits of moments of Olivia, and she was just, and even when she made a mistake, she would laugh at herself. That was her reaction. If something happened on the show that would normally make someone angry, she made a joke. She made it funny. She was very conscious of the audience, right? She kept that in mind. I am there to entertain you. Maybe, you had a hard day at work or whatever it is. Take your mind off it. I'm here to make you laugh. Maybe you'll learn something or you'll learn about a new tech thing or a new movie or comic. Cool, but we're here to entertain you. And Kevin and Olivia, just the palpable chemistry was there. And I was treated like part of the, I mean, I'm just the movie guy. I would come on and like, like they treated me like I was a big celebrity, which always felt very awkward because I was a fan of them, you know? So yeah, it was my best experience in TV ever. And I'm glad that like I did a little bit of TV after that, but it's just like, nah, nothing will top G4 or Attack of the Show. I'm glad that was kind of like, my mic drop. And I really wanted to tell the story of Attack of the Show in G4 with a little bit of, I'll admit it, a little bit of sentimental rose-colored glasses. a little view of that era of when, we celebrated things and didn't fight about stuff so much. And yeah, I mean, one criticism you could say of the doc is maybe it's a little sentimental at times, but that's my story to tell. So I just hope people appreciate it and remember there's a reason I think that Attack the Show and G4 had such a big following. And the doc is really a reminder of that.
So yeah, going to that, I wanted to ask you because there's a segment in the doc that you ask, if I'm not mistaken, right? To say how it went. So you asked to be on the segment for a short while because you had to take your trip to San Diego for Comic Con, and then the
Yes.
question started roaming like, "What's Comic Con?" And then the Attack of the Show like expanded in a way that they started with doing live shows in Comic Con, then E3, then other tech events. How does it feel that by you just saying that you're going to Comic Con, Attack of the Show made a more major impact in TV by being, I would say, the first show to do live shows on major events?
Well, I will say, look, I will actually give myself credit. The producers at Attack of the Show at the time in 2005 didn't know what Comic-Con was, and I spoke to the executive producer, Gavin Purcell, who went on to be the producer of the Jimmy Fallon Show, actually, on
Okay.
NBC. I said to Gavin, I said, "I gotta take time off comic because I have to go to Comic-Con," and he said, "What's Comic-Con? Is that a convention for comedians?" I said, "No, San Diego Comic-Con is like everything pop culture." I said, "I need to take this day off. Can we pre-record my DV Tuesday segment so I can leave early and go to Comic-Con?" He said, "No, we can't do that." And then they eventually they took Kevin that weekend that I was there. They went down with just a skeleton crew in 2005 and they filmed Comic-Con. They're like, "Oh my God, this is a great event." And then it was like 2006, they showed up there in a big way. And it was 2007, they had a huge live show on the floor. They really upped the ante. And that sort of like tracked like so many other things, like John Favreau being there, talking about Iron Man. Zack Snyder was there. It was crazy. So, yes, I will give myself credit for doing that. It's just, look, all I did was just tell the producer, "You should be going to Comic Con." And then they ended up going. So I earned that. I earned that. But I've been going to Comic Con like since '89.
Oh
Oddly, when it was
wow.
like just comic book convention, so it was like an annual. I've never missed a Comic Con since then. So, but no, it's the perfect place for G4. It's sort of like and I think that Comic Con even also influenced the show in a way because people, producers from the show and writers from the show got to see like, oh, this culture is much bigger. This audience already exists. It's bigger and it's growing. And what was great about Comic Con then, because I've been going to Comic Con so long, I went to Comic Con where the sighting of a woman at Comic Con was like seeing Bigfoot in the forest. It was rare. You never would see a woman at Comic Con. And in the time that I've been going, it was the early 2000s, the demographic started to change. Now, comic conventions like Comic Con, WonderCon, LA Comic Con, it's 50-50 men and women. It is a split demographic. And it wasn't like that in the old days of nerd comic culture, right? It just wasn't. Now it is split down. It's 50-50,
Hmm.
and that is a
Hmm.
good thing that nerd culture is a big tent. Everyone is welcome. Just what's the nerd thing you love? Come on in, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that, Attack of the Show helped that. I think that Marvel movies helped mainstream nerd culture also.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, Chris, this is going to be my final question of today. So, wanted to ask you because do you think that today's generation would accept Attack of the Show and G4 as it is? Even though we did have like a small relaunch, but do you think that G4 and Attack of the Show would be accepted by today's generation?
I think there's a way to do it. I think there is a way to do it. I think the one thing, don't listen to everyone on social media, who's telling you how to do something. I think that there's a way to evolve the comedy so that it could be fun and sometimes a little dangerous and sometimes maybe even raunchy, but do the unexpected. There's certainly a way that you could do it. But I would point out that the new G4 didn't even last a year, and the old G4, it took 5 years for it to find its groove because it launched in 2002. It was not a hit.
Hmm.
It took a while. And then, 3 years later, um, G4 TV launched Attack of the Show. They had years of making mistakes, and this show worked, this show didn't work. They were able to cut their teeth, and the new G4 did not have the same opportunity to experiment, fail, learn from mistakes, and grow its audience. So it's unfortunate that the plug was pulled before, but given the time, I fully believe that the new G4 could have evolved into something as popular as the old G4. But if you've got 5 years to kind of figure it out, you're gonna figure it out. Season one of Star Trek: The Next Generation, while there's some great episodes, isn't perfect. It took like a couple seasons for it to get really good, and the new G4 was not given the chance. So I'm sad about that. But what I hope the documentary does is leave a positive impression with people about the legacy of G4 TV and Attack of the Show.
No, that I hope so as well. Thank you, Chris, for giving us the time to speak about Attack of the Doc. As well, for all of our viewers, Attack of the Doc will world premiere on April 21st, offering a Q&A with Chris Gore at the Frida Cinema in Southern California. The tickets are available as well. And then it will be available through Indie Right for audience across all TV, VOD, and digital platforms on North America on April 24th. So don't miss out for Attack of the Dogs, and check out the tickets as well. They will be on the description down below. So Chris, thank you very much for giving us the time to speak about the documentary.
John, thank you so much, and I appreciate being on the show.
Thank you
Awesome.
very much. Bye.